Hello, nice to meet you. My name's Henry, and by the end of this video, we're going to be building a Postgres RESTful API. More specifically, a to-dos RESTful API that's going to be using Node.js as the backend and using the Express library to quickly run our server. Okay, so I just want to give you guys a quick overview of what the application is going to look like. Really, this is all it is. And it's really not much different from any other database that you used. You probably clicked on this video because maybe you had a background of MongoDB, and there's really not a lot of good tutorials that just show you the simple queries that are needed in order to run Postgres CRUD operations. Or you're either trying to avoid the idea of using SQLize, which in my opinion, it really kind of overcomplicates like the use of like SQL databases. So just a little quick overview of how this thing's going to work. You don't really need to understand these queries, but I really want you to understand how RESTful APIs work before we even begin. So I'm going to oversimplify this, but really a RESTful APIs is using transfer protocols in order to trigger CRUD operations. So more specifically, what we're going to be using as our transfer protocol is HTTP. So in HTTP, we have these post, get, put, and delete requests. And all these different types of requests are able to symbolize different CRUD operations we want to get done. So for example, if we decide to use a post request, what we're really trying to do is that we want to create a data in our database. So when we want to get something, we want to read data. When we want to put something, we want to update data in our database. If we want to delete, we want to delete something inside our database. Pretty straightforward from there. And as you can see here, we have the different types of queries that we can use in order to actually create, read, update, or delete. So there's a big misconception, but RESTful APIs are not the ones that are doing CRUD operations. They're simply there to take the HTTP requests and to instruct what type of CRUD operation needs to get done. So whether this is a MongoDB database or a Postgres or a MySQL database, they are the ones that are doing the CRUD operations. And it just turns out that the different types of database that you use have different types of ways of doing their queries. So in this case, this is the queries for Postgres we're going to be inserting. So anytime you want to use the insert command, it means that you want to create data. Anytime you want to use the select command, it means that you want to read data. Anytime you want to update, it means that you want to update data. And of course, if you want to use the delete command, it means that you want to delete data. And you'll also start to notice that there's this thing called where, and all it is just to be more specific on what type of data you want to change. So in the next section, what we're going to be doing is start building this to-do RESTful API. I forgot to tell you this, but there is going to be some pre-installation that needs to get done. You need to install PostgreSQL already on your database. Don't worry about it. I'm going to link a video in the bottom that you can click on to just really quickly install it. And the last thing you need is to have Node.js right here. Everything else, I'll just kind of explain to you. You just need to have a basic understanding of JavaScript. But otherwise, let's get started. Alrighty, so let's kind of start building our server. First thing I did was created a folder called pgbasic. You can really name this whatever you want. In my case, I called it pgs because that's one of the libraries that we're going to be using. So first things first, you're going to do npm init. And npm init is really just a way for you to keep track of all your packages in your application. And you can actually answer a few questions here. And the entry point is the file that's going to glue our server code all together. Alrighty. So next I'm going to do is create that file. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to npm install express and pg. So Express is a way for you to build servers on Node.js. And now the PG library, the PG library is a way for you to interact with the Postgres database. Right? And it allows you to use its pure queries versions instead of actually using an ORM like SQLize that will kind of limit you on using their queries. Okay, cool. So since we have that all set up, let's just kind of jump into building the server. We're going to do const express equals to require express. Oops. Okay, and we're going to make a variable called app which is going to take the Express library. It's going to run it. So app has all the methods from Express. So I can do app.listen. The reason I need this is because in order for my application to run, I need to listen to a port number. So I'm going to say console.log 3000. Server is listening on port. Right, and let's just kind of test this out. So I'm going to do node index. And you'll see that server's listening on port 3000, so that's working. And I highly recommend that you npm install nodemon, like that dev dependency. Reason I say that is because it makes your life easier. So you don't have to like keep turning on and off your server in order to see the changes. Nodemon essentially looks at your index files and it instantly restarts whenever you actually do a change in that file. So if I do nodemon index, and I decided to change this to 5, I could just do a simple Control S, and it's going to automatically do that change. You know what? I'm just going to keep that to 5,000. Okay, so cool. So since we have the server running, I kind of want to go a little bit on how this database thing is going to work on Postgres. Okay, so I have here already a draw.io set up for us, a diagram. Postgres is a little bit interesting. We have this big Postgres database right here. And inside that Postgres database, we have like other database inside here, like to-do database, which is what we're going to be creating, or zoo database, Microsoft database, or hotel database. And inside those database, we have tables. So in order to actually create a table, we have to first create a database. So if you look into your right, you'll see that in order to create a database in Postgres, you have to use the create database command, and then you have to specify the name. And the next thing is that we're going to create a table. So we're going to say create table to do, and we can't just actually simply do that. We have to describe the schema, or how exactly the to-do is going to be structured, because we don't want to put like random data inside our database. We want to be specific that what we want is just simply a description, which we'll go into more details of what this schema is going to look like. And also there's going to be a few commands that's going to really help you along the way of building, or at least making it a lot more easier to interact with Postgres. So you probably should have already installed Postgres already. So I'm going to open my Windows terminal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do psql-u Postgres. So what this means is that I'm going to be running that Postgres command, and I'm going to actually want a user called Postgres. So if you already installed Postgres, you automatically have a user called Postgres. Postgres is known as a super user, meaning that they have admin's rights to all of your database. Or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but essentially they have full access to everything. Okay, so I could just do psql-u Postgres. And when you installed it, you actually had to define a password to use. So in my case, I'm just going to put that in. Oh, and it was wrong. Okay, let me just do that again. There we go. So I'm inside the system now. Okay, so I'm in the Postgres database right now. And the big idea is that I want to do /c, or /l, sorry. So what this is going to let me do, and I can just bring the commands here, list all database in Postgres. So I'm going to list all of these little guys over here. It's not going to look like that, but you'll see that I have a lot of databases over here that's being set up. And if I want to be able to move into a database, so in this case, let's kind of, I already created to-do database. Cool, let's do that. So I'm going to do /c, and I'm going to go into to-do database. Okay. So now, as you can see, I moved inside the database. And then I can actually see all the tables inside there. So I can do /dt. And what you'll see is that there is indeed a to-do table, just kind of very similar to this structure right here. All right. So anyway, let's kind of like drop that table because I want to create this out of scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to do /c, database, just a random database. And I want to drop that to-do database because I want to start from scratch with you guys. So I'm going to do drop database to-do database. You want to be very careful of this command. you got to be very sure that you want to delete database, because if you start building scalable applications, you can actually be deleting really good data or private data. But anyway, we're going to delete that. And I almost forgot to mention that semicolons are extremely important when you're running these commands. You'll see here that it dropped the database, and if I do /l, the database is not there anymore. So what I want you guys to do is go back inside your basic or your Visual Studio Code, and I want you to make a file that's going to be called database.sql. Like I said, again, you can name this whatever you want. So this makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of build our database commands that we're going to be running on Postgres. So let's kind of get this on the side. I'll just shrink this a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a database called to-do database. And don't forget the semicolon, because we need to first create a database before we can even create a table. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a table. So if you want to learn how to do comments, you can do --. What I want to do next is that I want to /c into to-do database. Okay? So next, what I want to do is create a table that's going to be called to-do. And now I have to define the schema of what the to-do is going to look like. And we're only going to have two things. The first one is that we need to have a to-do ID. You can name this whatever you want, but the reason I say to-do ID is because I want to have a ID that distinguishes that specific to-do. So if I do to-do.id, I have to actually specify serial primary key. And primary key is essentially the unique ID that represents that item inside that to-do table. Okay? So we got to-do, serial primary key, and you're going to see what serial does later on, but essentially it's going to increment those numbers so it doesn't keep repeating. Okay, so we have that down, and the last thing we need is to have a description. Okay, so I have description over here, and I wanted to have a max character of 255. And that's all we have to do. Okay, and I forgot my semicolon here as well. All right. Okay, so let's gonna go put this into practice. Let's open our command line. You should have this already open, but really take that command right there, and let's just paste it right there. Okay, and you'll see that it says create database. Now that we have that, remember you have to do /c, or just to put more practice, let's do /l. I see to-do database right there. And now I'm going to do /c into to-do database. Okay, since I'm inside there now I'm going to take the schema that I just created and I'm going to put it right there. There we go. So now that should be inside our database, and what I could do last is do /dt to see all the different types of tables in that database. So you can see I only have a single to-do. Okay, so that seems to be pretty straightforward. So we have a running database that's working for us, and in the next section we're going to actually create another file that's going to start connecting into that schema, or start connecting to that database so we can start building some routes and RESTful APIs. Alrighty, so we have created a database and we also have created a server. So all that's next in this section is we're going to see how we can connect them together. And this is kind of where the PG library comes in. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to call it db.js because it's going to represent our database. And what I'm going to do is do const pool, uppercase P, and I'm going to require that PG library, and I'm going to use one of its methods called pool. Now what this allows us to do is that we can set a configuration for what or where we want to connect that database. So I'm going to do const lowercase p o l, and I'm going to instant that pool, and now I can configure this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say user. So the user for us is Postgres, because remember that's how we set it up. The password is going to be kthl822, or at least that's what I set my password as. Then we have to get the database name that we were working with. which is going to be to-do database. I think I named it that. And then we have to do our host, which is going to be localhost. And the reason it's localhost is because we're just going to do this on our local machines. And then finally, we have to do our port. And naturally, PostgreSQL runs on port 5432. Okay? And that's all we need to do to connect to our database. So I'm going to say module.exports equals to pull. And that's all it takes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my index and I'm going to require it because this is where we're going to be doing our routes in. So what this is going to allow us to do is run queries on this pool so we can actually either update, delete, insert, or see data. Okay, so in the next section, we're going to start working on our routes. Alrighty, so we are going to start building some actual routes and some queries. So the first thing I need to do is I have to do app.use, and this is going to give me access to the request.body. So anytime we're receiving data from the client side, the only way to get that is by accessing this object. And this right here essentially allows us to access that body with JSON data. Okay? So next, I have to create some routes. Oops, if I could spell that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these up into 5 parts. So the first one is we want to get all to-dos. Next, we want to get a to-do. Next, we want to create a to-do, update a to-do, and finally, we want to delete a to-do. And we're going to work on each of these routes and figure out how it works. So I'm going to be using something called Postman, and essentially it allows us to quickly create RESTful APIs so we can just test them. So remember how I said there's get, post, put, and delete requests? So essentially what we can do is specify the URL, and then we can make the specific request to interact with our RESTful API. Okay? So just to give you a heads up, if you haven't downloaded it, I highly recommend it. Well, actually, you need to download it if you want to do some post requests, unless you want to use curl. But besides that, let's actually start creating all to-dos. So I just realized I can't really get all to-dos if I don't even have a to-do in my database. So let's actually start with create a to-do. So I'm going to say app.posts because we are going to be adding data. And I'm going to call this /todos. I'm going to do regular request.body or request.res. So I'm an async guy. So what essentially this lets you do is that you can make async requests and it gives you access to try and catch. So sometimes it takes some time for data to get retrieved or to be done. So you have to use something called await, which waits for something to finish before it continues on. So I'll show that to you later on. So console.error.message. And what I'm going to do here is that I want to add some data. So I remember how I said there's this request.body object. So what I can do here is I can do console.log request.body, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So if I go inside here, and I just call it to-dos. And I want to make a post request because that's what I want to get done. I can go inside the body, and let me just kind of restart all of this. Essentially, you want to click on body, then you want to click raw, and then you want to specify you're working with JSON data. So I'm going to go there, and I already have some stuff already set up right here. Or let me just restart it with you guys so you can see what I'm doing. I can say item. I can say corn, for example. So if I click enter, you'll see that it appears right there. So that's how I'm able to get the data. Okay, so since we have an idea of how that functions, now let's go back to this. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to destructure this thing. What I'm actually looking for, what type of thing I'm looking for is called description. Because remember what we set up in our database structure is that what we have is a simple description for our to-do, or what needs to get done. So if I go into my index.js, that's what I want to get. So now let's start working on some queries. So I'm going to say const new to-do, and I'm going to say await pool So that comes from there. Pull that query. Now this is kind of where we start doing our magic. So in order to actually create something, we have to use the insert command. So I'm going to say insert into. Now I have to specify the table that I want to insert into, which is going to be to do. And then I have to specify also what type of column I want to work with. So in this case, I want to work with the description. And then I have to specify what type of value I want to fill that description with. So in that case, I'm going to say $1. And a $1 is essentially a variable that I'm going to be using to actually define what this description is. So what I'm going to define this as, and I can actually do a comma right here. So this $1 is going to be replaced with this thing I put right here, which is description. So it's going to be filling description with that $1. And since I want to get the data back, because it's update, or no, it's not update, it's inserting, I have to do returning star. So now I can get this new to do back. So if I do res.json, new to do, you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's go inside here and let's name this description. And let's say I need to clean my car. So now if I click enter, you'll see if you go to the bottom, you get all of these massive things. But if you look inside the rows, you'll see that our data has been saved inside the database. And we can even look inside our terminal. So I can go inside here and say select from to-dos, or to-dos, that's what we need the table as. And you'll see that my data has been saved inside there. Neato. Okay, so that's pretty neat. We have our data inside there. And since we just want to get this one right here, we can just be more specific and say new to do dot rows, because it's coming from there. And then I could specify it's the first item. Okay, so now let's change this up a tiny bit. I need to clean my dog. And if I click enter and go on the bottom, looks like, oh, that's because I spelled it wrong. It's not row, it's actually rows. So let me put that inside. Okay, let's save that again. And let's click enter once again. And ta-da! We have a new item. And the reason it's called to do ID 3 is because I made a faulty information. So you'll see here that I'm able to still add the data, but I wasn't able to send back a data because I said it wrong. Okay, so we have like 2 more data inside there. So not a problem, because it makes it a little bit better for us to start getting some to-dos now. So getting to do is a lot more easier. So remember how I kept using this command called select all from to do? This is essentially what we're going to be using. The star right here just means all. Okay, so if I click enter, it means I'm going to get all of these things. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say app.get. I'm going to call this slash to-dos. And I'm going to do the regular async request.body, or sorry, request.res. Then I'm going to do try catch again. Same convention. Okay. And finally, I just want to simply get the items. So I'm going to say const all to-dos. And then I'm going to say await, because it takes some time to get some data for that query. And all I'm going to do is say select all from to do. And then I could just simply do res.json all to do. And then I could just say .rows, so I can get all the items. So if I go inside here and I make this a get request, you'll see I get all 3 of my items right there. So neat. And this is coming from the rows. So the way how this is working is that I'm selecting all from the to-do table. And the reason I'm not doing returning stars is because this only works with insert and updates or deletes. When you're actually using the select, it means you just want to get the data back. So there's no need to do returning. Cool, so that's all it takes. The next one is if we want to get a specific to-do. So same convention, app.get, except this time we want to get a specific item. So I'm going to actually do something different called colon ID. So what is that exactly? And you probably already know, but I'll just say it again for the people who are new to this. So we already know there's something called request.body, but you can also access something that's called request.params. So anytime I add a colon, I don't know even how to pronounce it, but anytime I add this thing right here, and whatever I name it, I can access this as a variable in a request.params. So let me show you what I mean. If I decide to add a 5, and I'm going to console.log request.params now. So if I decide to click enter, I am going to console.log that 5 right there. And that's because it's coming from this variable. If I decide to call this pig, and I said dog, it is going to say pig, dog. Okay, so what I want to do is that I want the person to specify what type of to-do they want by putting in the user ID. So let me explain a little bit more. So let's kind of get this down. I'm going to destructure this to const. So I'm going to get ID, and I better change that so I don't forget. I'm going to call this request.params. And I almost forgot to do try catch again. So let's do that. Error.message. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say const to do, and I'm going to say pull that query, and I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to select all from the to-do tables, but now we're going to introduce a new player that's called the where clause. So this is interesting, but the where clause allows us to be specific on what type of data we want. Let me show you this. So if I wanted to get this first item, I would have to say select all from to do where, so I have to say to-do ID equals to 1. Now if I specify that, I get the first item. And we don't even have to use the ID. We can describe anything. If I said description, then all I have to do is kind of specify this is what I want. So I say I need to clean my car. And if I click enter, I get the item again. So pretty straightforward, but this is the same exact logic we're going to be using. We're going to say where the ID, so where the user ID, or not user, but the to-do ID, equals to $1. So remember $1 is a variable. So I can specify what that $1 is going to equal to, and I'm going to set it to the ID. And after that, I'm going to do res.json to do.rows.0 because I just want to get one item. Alrighty. So let's kind of test this thing out. Let's first get all the to-dos. I'm going to get this first one right here. I'm going to put it right there. And there we go. We get the specific items that we want. And that's all it takes to just get a specific to-do. So the hardest one probably is going to be update a to-do. That one is probably the most different, and I can just show you in the diagram how exactly it functions. If I can find it. There you go. I have it right there, but I think it's better if I just put it in the diagram. Okay, so inside here, you'll notice that when we are updating a to-do, we actually have to use something called set. So it means that we want to set a certain column to equal to something new, and then we're also using the where clause to specify what exactly we want to update. So the set is a new keyword we're going to introduce as well. So let me put it beside so you can keep referencing it. But anytime we want to update a to-do, I could say app.put because we're updating. And I'm going to say /to-do. And I'm going to also specify the ID. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be specific on what I'm changing. So I'm going to do async again. I'm going to do request.res. Since we're here, just going to do regular try catch. Right, so since we have this all set up, so we of course have to specify what exactly we want. So we're going to do const ID is from request.params, And also we want to specify the data that we are wanting to change. So we also have to get some data from the body. So what I'm going to get is the description that I'm trying to update from request.body. So we're going to be using these two things. And if it makes it more clear, this is going to be used for the where, and this is going to be used for the set. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say const update to do equals to await pool that query. And what I'm going to do is update, have to specify the table, which is to do, and then I have to set the description to equal to $1. So that's going to be for this thing right there. And then I'm going to say where it's located at, which is going to be to do ID equals to. So it's not going to be $1, but it's instead going to be $2. Okay? So this looks a little bit strange, but I'll explain it as I go by. So now I have to define what $1 is going to be and what $2 is going to be. So $1 is going to be description, because that's what I want to update the information into. And then $2 is going to be the result of the ID. And I also, well, actually I think I'll just stop from there. And then what I'm going to do is just simply say res.json to do was updated. Okay? So let's check this out really quick. And let's see if it works first before I can kind of go over it one more time with y'all. So I'm going to say to do, I'm going to change this one. So I'm going to make it a put request. So now I can go up. I'm going to change it to, instead of that, I'm going to say I need to eat dinner. Okay, so now if I click enter, we're going to get data that to do was updated. And the only way to make sure is, let's check inside our terminal. I'm going to say select all from to do. And to be more specific, I want to see the one that I changed. Oops. I didn't even specify this, but it has to be to do ID. And now you can see that it changed I need to eat dinner. Pretty cool. Right? So I changed the data right there. Alrighty. Yeah, so that's all it really takes to update. So what we're going to do is use the update command. We have to specify the table. We have to set the column that we want to change to $1, which we're specifying. And then we have to also specify where it is located at. Okay, so pretty simple. And delete isn't really much different from the rest of them. It's actually possibly the easiest one, right next to getting data. So what we're going to do is app.delete. I'm going to say /to-do. And I have to specify the ID, of course. We're going to do async request.res. And what I'm going to do is use the try-catch statement. Console.error. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is all I need to access is the const ID from request.params, because all I want to do is delete. I don't want to add or update any single data. And what I'm going to do is say const delete to do, and I'm going to say await poll.query, and I'm going to say delete from, and I have to specify the table, which is going to be to do, and I have to say where the location's at. So in this case, it's going to be to do ID is going to equal to $1, and I have to specify where that's at, and I'm just going to put ID from there. And then if all works out well for us, I can just do a simple res.json and say to do was successfully, oh my god, okay, whatever, I'll keep it that way. Today was successfully to do, oh, deleted. Whew. Okay, so that's really all it really takes to delete, but let's see if it works. So now that I have this, let's see all our to-dos really quick. So I could be picky on what I want to delete. So in this case, I want to delete one of these guys because I have a duplicate. So I can just say I want to delete number 3. And if I click enter, you can see that to-do was successfully deleted. Okay, and we can look inside here. Oh, you know what? We don't even need to use our terminal. Let's just kind of use our RESTful API. So we can look inside here, and you'll see that our, oh yeah, has be get requests. You can see now that we only have 2 items. So congratulations, you essentially have created a simple RESTful APIs. Alrighty, so I just want to first congratulate you for being able to complete this Postgres RESTful APIs. So from here, you'll be able to know the fundamentals to building even more complex applications. Okay, so I just want to do a quick overview to make this more ingrained in your mind. So what we worked with was the select command, we worked with the update, delete, and the insert command. So anytime you want to get data, you will have to use select. And remember how I kept using star? That means that you want to get every column. But sometimes you don't want to give out all the columns. Like for example, in this case, I just specify description instead of star. And if I go into my Postman, and I already set it up here, if I click enter, it's only going to give me the descriptions. And the reason why sometimes you may want to do that is because let's say that you have some pretty private data in the database and you don't want to give it to the client side. So instead of using a star, you can just specify what type of data you want to give back to the front end. Okay? And then from here, when we started working on this route, you'll see that we introduced the where clause. So the where clause is just there to be more specific on what exactly you want to change. And then you'll see that there's this thing called $1, and this is a place where it's a placeholder where we can actually define what it's going to equal to. And the way we define that is creating an array that's going to specify the value, which in this case is going to be ID. So really what this is saying is selecting all from the table of to-do, where to-do ID equals to ID, okay? And this is whatever we specify in the params. Now, if we do create, we use something called insert into. And what we have to do here is specify the column that we wanted to insert or add, and then we have to specify the values, which again is going to be $1. And then we have to specify that $1 was going to equal to description, which is from request.body. Now this one may be a little bit confusing for a lot of people. This is from the documentation of PG, but essentially anytime you're inserting or updating something, you have to use returning star to be specifically that you wanted to get the data back. And you can read more on that in the PG library. And then for right here, when we're going to update something, what we're going to do is that we're going to set the column to the new value, which in this case is description, and then we have to specify what exactly we want to update. Now this one's a little different because we see $1 and we see $2, and all we have to do is just define $1 in the first array, and then we can define $2 as the second item in the array. Okay, so pretty simple, and delete is also straightforward. It just means you want to delete from the table where the do ID equals to $1. Okay. So yeah, that's really all it takes to building a RESTful API of Postgres. And since you understand the fundamentals, it makes it a lot more easier for you to build much more complex application. Okay, so where do I go from here? So 2 videos I recommend, since you already have a great fundamentals with Node.js and Express, is that I recommend that you go into FreeCodeCamp, not the actual website, but on YouTube, and go to FreeCodeCamp Postgres in 4 hours. And it will give you a great breakdown from beginner to advanced queries for Postgres. So what we're doing here are queries. But what he teaches you is not only these CRUD operations, but also the ways of how to make more complex, like queries. So that allows you to build much better scalable projects than just a simple to-do RESTful API. And then after that one, once you understand Postgres pretty well, then you could jump on to a channel called Caleb Curry, I think that's his name. And he created a whole entire course about database designs. And in my opinion, I feel like database designs should be a required courses for you to take in order to build applications. The reason I say that is because it gives you a whole new perspective on how your applications interact with each other. Okay, so I wish you guys best of luck. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I wish you great luck in building your other RESTful APIs and applications.